He didn't just gossip, he monetized it. That's the part that stuck to the roof of my mouth like peanut butter, while the rest of my day tried to move on. In every friend group, there's a collector, the one who keeps screenshots like souvenirs. You've seen it. Little digital fossils of jokes, frustrations, half-formed plans. In our circle, that was Mason, 32, clever, the guy who knew which taco truck was open past midnight and which venue would comp wristbands if you named the right intern. In Austin, people like him are the unofficial currency of this city, connectors. They move invitations, rumors, and restaurant openings the way others move furniture. When a connector tips into broker, you don't notice at first. You only feel the fee after the deal is done. I worked comms at a non-profit arts festival on the east side. My job was smoothing stories, so they read like human truth, short, warm, believable. You'd recognize the tone from city newsletters that sound like a neighbor wrote them. The group chat, 10 of us from college and jobs and pickup soccer, was my messy counterbalance. In there, people say the unpracticed things. Not cruel, not reckless, just human. You know that space where sarcasm is safe and context does the heavy lifting. You think you're allowed to be unfinished there. You think you're allowed to be wrong and uncanceled by dawn. Here's the architecture of a small betrayal. It never feels cinematic. It feels like a Tuesday. You scroll between emails and calendar holds and then, bam, a line you wrote at 1:13 a.m. appears on a mid-tier gossip blog like it was born in a newsroom. The post didn't name me, not outright. It didn't have to. In local scenes, a detail is a fingerprint. A certain East Side festival is ghosting vendors. The headline teased, and there was my text, clipped from our chat. We can't confirm everyone this week. We don't even have the stage plot. Out of context, you look like a villain. In context, you were just honest at 1:13 a.m. People think betrayal is about cruelty. Often, it's about math. Someone decides your private words are worth more in the marketplace than in the friendship. Ask yourself, how many times have you screenshotted a message for safety, then felt the itch to forward it? Be honest. The internet trained you to think every moment has resale value. I told myself it could have been anyone, but brokers leave trails. And Mason, our collector, loved a clean invoice. When the blog credited a reliable source close to the planning team, I felt the first hinge loosen. Then I remembered he joked last week about turning context into coffee money. I laughed then. I wasn't laughing when I saw the update timestamp line up perfectly with the night he'd asked. Wait, what did the board say exactly? And I, tired and trusting, had answered in tidy bullet points. The first instinct is denial. You want to believe the leak is random, that life is too messy for coincidences to point in only one direction. I replayed conversations like bad security footage. Who had access? Who would care enough? But gossip blogs don't chase small-town arts logistics unless someone hands them breadcrumbs in a neat paper bag. And Mason had the bag. In every friend group, there's an archetype you only recognize once the damage is done. He was the hustler, not in the Wall Street sense, but in the casual grind of someone who treats everything like barter. Tickets, connections, snippets of inside chatter. He turned all of it into tiny favors that stacked into reputation. Think about your own circle. You probably know someone like that. The person who insists, I've got a guy, but never admits you're their guy when the chips fall. That's the psychology. The hustler survives by converting trust into currency. Sometimes they even convince themselves they're doing you a favor, giving your words reach. The fallout wasn't cinematic either. No angry board meeting. No confrontation under a spotlight. It was subtler. Vendors started sending cold emails asking for clarification. A colleague I liked avoided eye contact in the break room. Reputation doesn't shatter, it erodes. Drip by drip, your competence feels questioned. You know that sensation when people look at you with a slightly tilted head, like they're recalibrating? That's how it starts. I tried testing the waters. Dropped a line in the group chat. Casual. Funny how the blog had our exact phrasing. Most gave half-hearted emojis. Mason responded with, they're everywhere. Like it was weather. That's the hustler again. Downplay, deflect, let the current carry suspicion past you. But you notice tone. You hear how quick someone moves away from the heat. And if you're honest, You feel the weight of their silence pressing on the places you thought were safe. It's easy to judge betrayal from the outside. You tell yourself you cut them off clean, but inside it you hesitate. Because what's really on the line isn't just a chat log, it's years of in-jokes, weekends spent hauling boxes, the comfort of shorthand language that only comes from time. You hesitate because to name the betrayal is to admit the friendship is gone. And sometimes losing the idea of the friendship hurts more than the blog post itself. Here's the thing about group chats. They aren't just texts. They're archives of trust. Every dumb meme, every late-night rant, every screenshot of a dating profile is a brick in a wall you think will hold. When one brick is pulled out, you don't just see the gap. You start scanning the whole structure for cracks. Mason didn't confess. Of course he didn't. Hustlers rarely do. Their game depends on plausible deniability. He kept sliding jokes into the chat, dropping weekend invites, acting as if nothing had shifted. And that's where the psychology gets interesting. The betrayer counts on inertia. They gamble you'd rather keep the circle intact than risk blowing it up with accusations. Think about your own circles. How often do people let something slide just to preserve the mood? That's the exact crack he leveraged. But I couldn't unsee it. At work, I found myself editing every Slack message twice, imagining how it might sound clipped and pasted somewhere else. At night, I'd reread the chat like it was evidence, not banter. That's the corrosive part. You stop speaking naturally and start curating even among friends. It's a shift from safety to surveillance, and once it happens, you can't fully reverse it. Meanwhile, the gossip blog milked the post. They spun 2 follow-ups, each thinner than the last but still laced with enough insider tone to feel credible. My colleagues treated me politely, but I knew the math. Perception outweighs clarification. And Mason? He kept weaving himself into every new plan, every event invitation, as though nothing had burned. That's another hustler move. Occupy the center of the group so tightly that cutting them out feels impossible. I started to wonder if silence was just another form of enabling. If by not naming what I saw, I was complicit in turning private words into his next invoice. That thought sat heavier than the blog post itself, because once you ask yourself that question, you realize trust isn't just broken by the one who sells it, it's also weakened by the ones who stay quiet. The next weekend, we met at a bar off E6, the usual spot where the lighting was dim enough to feel private but loud enough to blur awkward pauses. Mason showed up like always, slapping shoulders, ordering around, talking about some band nobody had heard of yet. To anyone else, he looked like glue, the guy who kept us orbiting. To me, he looked like someone rehearsing normalcy. Here's what I noticed. Hustlers thrive in groups because the group disguises their transactions. You can't always tell when they're listening for friendship and when they're listening for leverage. And once you start watching, you see the tiny cues, the way Mason leaned in when someone mentioned work drama, how his questions weren't casual but exact, how he stored details like chips he'd later cash. That's not friendship. That's inventory. I tried to enjoy the night. I laughed at the stories, nodded along, but I kept checking faces. Did anyone else see it? Or was I the only one awake in a room that preferred dreaming? That's the unsettling part. You realize the group isn't a collective of equals. It's a network with roles, and my role, apparently, was the communicator, the one whose words were worth reselling. And once you know your role, you can't unknow it. At work, the ripple effects deepened. A board member cornered me in the hallway, asking if I'd been off the record with journalists. I assured them no, but the shadow lingered. Reputations in small cities don't collapse overnight. They fray slowly, and I felt the threads slipping through my hands. I'd built years of credibility with careful work, and suddenly it felt like one chat message was all anyone remembered. And maybe this is the hardest truth to swallow. Betrayal doesn't end when the moment passes. It hangs around like smoke in your clothes. You sit in a bar with friends, you laugh, you share nachos, but somewhere inside, you're running calculations. What would it cost to say it out loud? To look Mason in the eye and call it what it was? Because until you do, you're not really free. You're just living under a ceiling that might collapse any second. I didn't plan the confrontation, but it came anyway. One Tuesday night, the chat was buzzing about a city council debate over zoning, something only half of us actually cared about. I tossed in a quick comment, nothing scandalous, just an observation about how the new policy would hurt small venues. A few hours later, scrolling before bed, I saw the same line lifted word for word in a local insider account on social media. Same punctuation, same phrasing. That was it. Patterns matter. Once is coincidence, twice is suspicion, 3 times is confirmation. And this was 3. I knew who it was. You probably do, too, if you've ever caught someone reusing your words like spare change. There's a chill to it. You feel copied, not heard. So I messaged Mason privately. Short, direct. Stop sending our chat to blogs. His reply came back fast, too fast. LOL, what? I'd never. That's the hustler's defense. Mock the accusation before it sticks. He even threw in a laughing emoji, like the matter was beneath seriousness. But speed betrays nerves. You don't type that quickly unless you're already drafting excuses in your head. Here's where psychology kicks in. A hustler counts on your exhaustion. They bank on you deciding it's not worth the fight, that keeping the peace is easier than burning the bridge. And in groups, silence always favors the one doing harm, because speaking up means risking isolation, while staying quiet means at least you're still in. It's the oldest tension in social dynamics, belonging versus integrity. At work, my patience thinned. I caught myself snapping at colleagues, drafting emails with an edge I didn't recognize. The erosion was spreading. You know that sense when your private life infects your professional tone? That's when I realized this wasn't just about a friend. It was about the slow collapse of how I carried myself everywhere else. The next weekend, another invite came through. Trivia night. Same bar. I stared at it for a long time. Do you go smile and pretend? Or do you finally put a price on your own words and decide they're worth more than his next invoice? I went. Of course I went. That's the part that stung most afterward, realizing how automatic it felt. The group chat buzzed, plans locked in, and I showed up like muscle memory. That's the trap of long friendships. Routine becomes stronger than resentment. You think you're making a choice, but really you're following a groove that's been carved over years. At the bar, everything looked normal. Pitchers of beer, trivia sheets, the same inside jokes about who always messed up the music round. Mason was in peak form, rallying the table, jotting answers with a flair that said he'd done this before. To anyone watching, we were a picture of camaraderie. But I saw the subtext. Every quip was a net cast for material, every laugh a cover for scanning the room. Hustlers don't just collect, they curate. They know exactly what scraps might be worth something to someone else. I caught myself studying him instead of the trivia questions, noticing the way he probed with casual questions. What's your boss like these days? Or, did that vendor finally pay up? As though the answers were just small talk. And maybe that's when it hit me hardest. The group wasn't broken because of one leak. It was broken because the game had shifted, and he was the only one who admitted it, even if only to himself. Meanwhile, the work rumors hadn't died down. An email thread landed on my desk the next morning with a board member asking for more transparency. The subtext was clear. They thought I'd been sloppy. You can defend yourself against lies, but not against the idea that you're careless. That suspicion is sticky. Once it's there, it colors every future mistake as proof. Walking home from trivia, I realized silence was no longer neutral. It was participation. Each beer I drank at Mason's table was a small vote for his version of reality. And maybe you've felt it too, that moment you understand staying is a choice, not an accident. You can't unknow it once it clicks. The only question left was whether I had the nerve to act on it. Acting on it didn't mean a dramatic blow-up. It started smaller, quieter. I muted the group chat for a week. That might sound trivial, but when you've been tethered to the same thread for years, silence feels like a limb going numb. No buzzing phone, no memes, no lazy midday polls about where to grab lunch, just space. And in that space, I started hearing my own thoughts again instead of Mason's echoes. Here's the psychology of withdrawal. People notice absence faster than presence. You don't have to announce anything. The gap does the talking. By day 3, I had 2 DMs. Everything good? And, haven't seen you around. Mason though? Nothing. That told me everything. The hustler doesn't chase unless there's profit on the line. My absence didn't cost him a thing. At work, the tension eased just a little. Without the constant bleed of suspicion, I had more bandwidth to handle actual tasks. I doubled down on being meticulous, making sure no line I wrote could be twisted out of context. It was exhausting, but it kept me sane. Colleagues started softening again, probably because they saw I wasn't rattled. In small ecosystems, confidence repairs faster than apologies. But friendship isn't an ecosystem you can fix alone. Muting the chat didn't change the fact that I'd built years of trust on ground that wasn't solid. I found myself questioning everything retroactively. Was that joke about my deadlines last year just a joke? Or was it data logged for later? When someone knows your soft spots, you never quite stop wondering if they were storing them like assets. That's when I realized the bigger loss wasn't reputation. It was the erasure of safety. The kind of safety that lets you type a messy thought at 1:13 a.m. and trust it'll stay in the circle. Once that's gone, you can't rebuild it with the same people. You can only decide whether to accept the cracks or walk away from the wall entirely. I didn't announce anything. No speeches, no ultimatums. I just stopped showing up, skipped the trivia nights, ignored the brunch invites, let the memes stack up unread. The group didn't implode. That's the strange thing. You expect absence to trigger a reaction, but most circles keep spinning. People adapt, fill the silence with someone else's jokes, and before long, your presence feels optional even to yourself. Mason still posted non-stop, still orchestrated outings, still played the role of glue. Watching from the outside, I saw the hustle more clearly than ever. He wasn't just a friend. He was running a small social economy. Every anecdote, every screenshot, every funny retelling was a deposit into his credibility account. He thrived on being the one who knew things. And if you've ever stepped back from a group, you know how perspective sharpens. What once looked like charm starts to look like strategy. At work, my footing grew steadier. I leaned into projects that had nothing to do with the blog mess, building wins that colleagues could see firsthand. You learn quickly that reputation repairs not with explanations, but with new evidence. Each successful event became a patch, and over time, the suspicion faded into background noise. I won't say it disappeared, but it stopped defining me. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Leaving the group hurt more than the leak itself. Because what you mourn isn't just the friend who betrayed you. It's the version of yourself that felt safe among them. That version can't come back, and facing that is heavier than pointing fingers. You may think the solution is confrontation, but sometimes it's subtraction. Sometimes survival is measured by who you stop talking to. One night, scrolling half asleep, I saw Mason quoted again in that same gossip blog, this time about a different local scene. Same phrasing, same smug tone of a source close to the matter. And instead of anger, I felt clarity. He wasn't going to stop. The only question left was whether I'd let my silence keep endorsing him, or finally say something that put a real price on his hustle. The opportunity arrived without me forcing it. A colleague forwarded me another blog link, asking if I'd seen it. The post quoted a source, trashing a new arts nonprofit, ironically one run by a mutual friend outside the group chat. The details were too specific, the phrasing too familiar. I didn't even need to check twice. Mason had shifted targets. That's the hustler's arc. Once one well runs dry, they move to the next. It isn't personal, though it feels personal when you're on the receiving end. It's transactional. And if you've ever known someone like that, you understand the logic. The hustle isn't about loyalty, it's about supply. As long as someone keeps giving, the machine keeps running. This time, I didn't stay quiet. I sent the link back to the group with a single line. Funny how this sounds just like our chat last month. No emojis, no softenings. The room went still. You could feel it in the lack of replies. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, one friend broke with, "Wait, is this him?" That was all it took. The curtain slipped. Here's where group psychology kicks in. People rarely act until someone else names the thing they've been avoiding. My message opened the gate. Others piled in, connecting dots, recalling past leaks they'd shrugged off. Mason tried to spin. "Come on, you're overreacting. These blogs just make stuff up." But the tide had turned. Once suspicion tips into consensus, even the smoothest talker can't reverse it. I wasn't triumphant. If anything, it felt heavy. Years of shorthand jokes, and weekends together reduced to a cold silence on my screen. But I also felt something else. Relief. Relief that the smoke had finally cleared, that I wasn't crazy for seeing the pattern, that the erosion wasn't just in my head. Sometimes the cleanest break doesn't come from leaving. It comes from telling the truth out loud and watching the room decide what to do with it. The group chat never officially died, but it limped. Fewer messages, longer pauses, invitations that landed with no takers. Mason tried to keep the energy alive, tossing memes and suggesting meetups, but the center of gravity was gone. People had seen too much. Once trust collapses, you can't patch it with gifts. For me, the quiet was both loss and liberation. I missed the comfort of easy banter, the shorthand only long friendships create, but I also felt lighter. I didn't have to weigh every word against the chance of resale. My thoughts could return to being just that, mine. If you've ever stepped out of a toxic dynamic, you know the bittersweetness, grieving what it once was, while breathing easier because it's over. At work, I kept my head down, built wins, let actions speak. Slowly, the gossip fog lifted. Colleagues stopped side-eyeing me. Vendors trusted my emails again. It wasn't dramatic. It was gradual, like grass regrowing after too many footsteps. Reputation heals when you stop defending it and start living like it's intact. And Mason? Last I heard, he found another circle, another feed of material to trade. Hustlers always do. It's their nature, to move on before the ground beneath them fully caves. I don't wish him harm. I just know my role in his economy is finished. Looking back, the real lesson wasn't about betrayal. It was about value. If you don't decide what your words are worth, someone else will, and they'll sell them cheap. So maybe the cleanest ending is this. I lost a chat, a circle, a friend. But I gained something harder to fracture, the clarity to protect my own voice before anyone else tries to cash it in.